He had barely settled into his seat before trouble arrived in a navy blue blazer and too much perfume. "Excuse me, sir," the flight attendant said, her voice clipped. "You're in the wrong place." The man, a tall black professional dressed in a charcoal suit and tan loafers, reached calmly into his breast pocket and handed her his boarding pass. She stared at it, then glanced at the white man sitting one row over, feet up, earbuds in, sipping from a tumbler that didn't come from the terminal. He was sprawled in the seat marked 2A. The same number printed on the boarding pass now shakes slightly in her hand. Still, she turned back to the black man. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to find another seat until we sort this out." His brow creased. "This is my seat." Passengers nearby paused their conversations. One by one, phones began to lift. Quiet clicks of record buttons replaced idle chatter. The white man didn't even look up. A second attendant approached, tone firmer. "Sir, we won't be able to take off until you cooperate." "Cooperate?" he asked, his voice even. The woman leaned in, lowered her voice like she was doing him a favor. "You're making people uncomfortable." A laugh came from the back, bitter, sharp. Someone muttered, "Here we go again." The cabin tensed. A young woman turned to her mother and whispered, "Why don't they just check the seat list?" Another passenger called out, "He's got the right ticket, just move the other guy." But the flight crew didn't look at the other guy. They looked only at the man who'd paid full fare, arrived early, and had the documents to prove it. And then security boarded the plane. If this story already has your heart racing, take a second to subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ. We drop new real-life stories that matter every week. And tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from right now? We see you and we appreciate you. They asked him again to move. This time, they didn't wait for a response. Because in the next 40 seconds, someone would be screaming, and it wouldn't be who you expect. His wrist twisted slightly as they grabbed him. Not violently, not yet, but with that pressure that says, "You're not in control anymore." He didn't resist, he didn't shout, he simply said, "My name is Darius Benton, this is my seat." But the security staff didn't care, neither did the flight crew. In the row behind him, a woman whispered, "Wait, did he just say Darius Benton?" One man blinked, looked up from his phone. "The infrastructure guy?" A third passenger pulled up an article on his tablet. Darius E. Benton, the black CEO behind America's largest privately owned engineering firm. Forbes, Bloomberg, Fortune. He was that Darius. The man the airline had been negotiating with for nearly a year. The man whose signature alone could unlock a $7 billion project across 3 continents. The man who'd just been told, in public on camera, that he didn't belong in seat 2A. They didn't know that yet. To the crew, he was just a problem with good posture. They made a show of helping the white man next to him, offering him a fresh drink as security clamped down on Darius's shoulder. A teenager in row 4 shouted, "He's not doing anything. You got the wrong guy." A mother tried to shield her kid's eyes. "Don't look." But the boy looked. Everyone did. The phones captured every second, his briefcase falling to the floor, his boarding pass fluttering underfoot, the slight shake in his hand as he adjusted his blazer before being pulled from the cabin. Nobody offered to help. Not the pilot, not the attendants, not the man in his seat, who never once said a word. And just like that, the doors closed. The engines hummed. The plane lifted into the sky without him. On the ground, Darius stood by the terminal glass, expression unreadable. But his mind was moving faster than any jet, because he hadn't flown a commercial in 6 years. This trip, he'd chosen to show face, to send a message, to meet his new partners, the very airline that had just dragged him out like a threat. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so familiar. This section dives deeper into the racial tension of the moment and the normalization of bias treatment, while peeling back the psychological layer of how even extreme professionalism can't shield black success from public suspicion. Everything is in alignment with the story's core message and tone. Back in the terminal, Darius straightened his tie. Not out of vanity, but instinct, a move he'd perfected in boardrooms where presence meant protection. But here, it hadn't mattered. No suit, no PhD, no billion-dollar valuation could stop them from treating him like a threat before he opened his mouth. Security officers flanked him now, not speaking. One typed into a tablet, The other stood just close enough to imply dominance, just far enough to avoid physical liability. A manager from the airline finally appeared, breathless, mid-30s, eyes darting. "Sir, I understand there's been a misunderstanding." Darius didn't blink. A misunderstanding? The man hesitated. "It appears there was an overlap in the seat assignment system. We're working on reassigning." "My seat? The one I paid for?" Darius held up the crumpled boarding pass. "That one?" No answer. People were still watching. The phones were still up. Somewhere in the crowd, a teenage girl whispered, "Isn't that the guy from the airport ad? The one with the green cities?" Her mother grabbed her arm. "Shh. Not now." Inside gate 37C, the plane had already pushed back. Darius's luggage was somewhere on board, headed for Geneva, without him. And that man? The white one in 2A? Still flying in luxury, sipping champagne that was never meant for him. 3 hours earlier, Darius had been on a call with 2 vice presidents from the same airline, finalizing the launch announcement for the African Expansion Initiative. The project would build sustainable runways and smart terminals across Nairobi, Lagos, Johannesburg, all with this airline's branding. His company was the key contractor. He was traveling there to sign the deal, in Geneva, in person, to shake hands, be photographed, and stand as proof that progress could look like him. But to that flight crew, he was an inconvenience. And once again, a black man with power had to prove he wasn't a problem before he could prove he had a purpose. The manager shifted. "Sir, we understand the situation was unfortunate. We can place you on the next available flight." "No? No? I won't be reboarding your plane." "Well, sir, there aren't many options to Geneva tonight." Darius looked him in the eye. "There aren't many options for dignity either, but I brought mine with me." The man didn't know how to respond. And it was in that pause, in that split second of exposed discomfort, that something changed. Darius turned, pulled out his phone, and opened his contacts. Not his assistant. Not legal. Not PR. He called the chairman directly, on speaker. "Leonard," he said, "your staff just removed me from my seat in front of dozens of passengers." "Wait, what?" "They said I was making people uncomfortable." A pause. "This deal we're working on?" Darius continued. "You can call it off." Leonard's voice cracked through the line, low and rattled. "Darius, don't do anything right now. Let me. It's already done." Click. He slid the phone into his coat pocket and walked away. Not fast, not loud, not looking back. No one stopped him. No one apologized. Because deep down, they knew exactly what had happened. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't resisted. And yet he had still been treated like a man who didn't belong in a space he helped build. Authority had been blind to the boarding pass in his hand, but hypersensitive to the skin holding it. That's what authority looks like when it's afraid of equity. The video hit social media before Darius reached the airport exit. A 43-second clip, grainy, shot from row 5A. It opened with his calm voice, "I have my ticket right here." Then a close-up of security gripping his arm. Then silence, until a woman's voice cracked, "Oh my God, they're dragging him." By the time Darius stepped into his waiting car, seat 2A was trending. 2 hours later, news headlines hit back to back. Black man forcibly removed from plane after seat dispute. Was this racial profiling in business class? CEO or not, he was treated like a threat. But the airline's response was swift and cold. A routine seating discrepancy. The passenger became uncooperative. "We followed protocol." The statement didn't mention his name. It didn't mention he was invited by them. It didn't mention the deal. They issued it to protect themselves, not to make anything right. What they didn't count on was who Darius was. By morning, journalists had connected the dots. Bloomberg ran a full exposé. The man in 2A was the airline's $7 partner. Photos from his last conference spread fast. Darius on stage in New York, arm around the same airline VP who now claimed they'd never interacted. The lie unraveled by breakfast. Business media pounced. How do you lose a $7 deal on a seat assignment? But the comment section told a deeper story. Under every article, strangers wrote, "This happened to my husband. My dad flies first class every week and still gets the side eye. They wouldn't have done this to a white CEO." And they were right. Because days later, the airline admitted in a closed-door session that the seat mix-up wasn't an error at all. Both names had been correctly entered. They just assumed the white man belonged in 2A. And when the black man claimed it, they saw him as the problem. Darius never posted a single video, never gave a soundbite, never ranted. He didn't have to. The receipts spoke louder than outrage, the footage, the headlines, the business history. What made the story explode wasn't just the humiliation, it was who he was. Because the world expected a victim. Instead, they saw a man who walked away from a billion-dollar deal without blinking, and that, more than anything, made the public lean in. What kind of man does that? What kind of man doesn't even flinch? The airline's PR team rushed to contain it. A second statement went out, warmer this time. They called it an unfortunate situation, offered a private apology, offered silence money. Darius declined it all. He hadn't asked to be treated like royalty, just like a person, and they couldn't even do that. The next morning, the airline's CEO woke to an emergency board call already in progress. 3 screens on mute, 2 more blacked out. Everyone is talking at once. Tell me this isn't the same Benton. Why the hell was he flying a commercial? Who approved the statement without verifying the name? Where's legal? What none of them realized was Darius had already made his move. The Geneva signing had been scheduled for Friday morning. 5 days from now, that deal would have secured a $7 billion joint venture to expand green airport infrastructure across Africa. A long-term partnership between Darius's firm and the airline. The plan included 3 new hubs, 15 new routes, and contracts with over 200 regional suppliers. They called it the New Sky Corridor, and Darius Benton was the reason it had legs. He wasn't just a contractor. He was the architect. The voice that brought Western investors and African regulators to the same table. The face that promised the airline a new image. Modern, ethical, global. The deal was their shot at rebuilding their reputation after years of quiet scandals. And then they dragged him off a plane and handed him a louder microphone than any stage in Geneva could offer. Darius said nothing publicly, but his office issued a single memo to the airline's board. Effective immediately, Benton and Vail withdraws from all negotiations related to Project Sky Corridor. This decision is final and not subject to review. That memo leaked within the hour. Stock analysts went into freefall. CNBC ran a ticker alert, Black CEO withdraws, $7 deal in jeopardy. Within 48 hours, 2 African governments paused their letters of intent. Investors started calling competitors. And Darius, he stayed quiet. Because sometimes dignity doesn't protest. It just exits the room and takes everything with it. Behind closed doors, the airline's lawyers begged for a meeting. One suggested flying privately to Darius's office with a new agreement, an apology, whatever it took. But Darius wasn't interested. He'd made the decision the moment the security guard touched his shoulder, because it wasn't just about a seat. It was about a culture, the kind that smiles in the boardroom and flinches in the aisle. The kind that praises diversity in press releases but fails the simplest test of respect. And he wasn't going to sign a partnership that started with humiliation. The fallout was immediate and wide. 2 VPs resigned within a week. A major investor pulled $200 million from the airline's expansion budget, and internally, the staff turned on each other. A leaked email revealed an executive blaming the flight attendant for costing us the continent. But no one blamed the white man who refused to move, because no one ever does. Meanwhile, other companies reached out to Darius, quietly, respectfully. Whatever you're planning next, we'd like to be part of it. He hadn't said a word on camera, he hadn't written a think piece, but just by walking away, he'd created a blueprint. One where power didn't beg, it walked, and made the ground tremble behind it. The irony? Had they simply acknowledged the mistake, this chapter might never have been written. Had anyone said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Benton, we were wrong," things might have ended differently. But that's the thing about racism dressed in policy. It never thinks it needs to apologize, because it doesn't believe it did anything wrong. The video of the incident had already spread across social media like wildfire before Darius Benton even landed. Comments poured in. Why is the black man always assumed to be in the wrong? Did they even check the ticket? He handled that with so much dignity. But in the skyscraper boardroom of Altavia Holdings the next morning, the tone was different, colder. Whispers slid across the oval table like knives. This is a PR nightmare. We just shook hands with the airline's COO. Can we afford to delay? Darius sat at the head of the table, silent, poised. He had said nothing yet. He didn't need to. His silence carried more than the buzz of every device around him. The room was waiting. Finally he spoke. "Let me be clear, I don't negotiate with people who humiliate me in public then pretend it was a misunderstanding behind closed doors." A few board members shifted. One cleared his throat, cautiously. "Darius, we've spent 8 months structuring this partnership. $7 billion in infrastructure. 17,000 projected jobs across 5 countries. We've invested everything, emotions aside." Darius raised a single hand. "If I, as a black CEO, am treated like that in first class, how do you think they'll treat our black engineers boarding from Lagos? Or our young tech interns from Atlanta?" No one had an answer. "The world just watched me get pulled from a seat I paid for because someone felt I didn't belong there. That airline made their position clear. Now it's time I made mine." A pin drop would have sounded like thunder. The lawyer sitting to his right slid a folder across the table. Darius flipped it open. Termination papers. He signed with swift finality, no speech, no drama, just ink. Across the globe, stock analysts scrambled to revise forecasts. In the comment section of the now viral video, a new top comment appeared. "He just cost them $7 with one signature. You don't get to decide who belongs, not anymore." And just like that, Darius Benton reminded the world, power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply walks away. But the story wasn't over yet, because later that evening, the airline's CEO made a call he never thought he'd have to make. It was 6:42 p.m. when Darius's phone buzzed. Not his assistant's line, not his PR director, his personal phone. Unknown caller. He let it ring twice before picking up. Darius Benton speaking. There was a pause, then a voice, polished, firm, and desperate to sound composed. "Mr. Benton, this is Damian Crowley, CEO of North Air Airlines. I believe we owe you a sincere apology." Darius didn't blink. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, looking down at the bustling city. "You don't owe me an apology," Darius said slowly. "You owe every black person who's ever been side-eyed in first class an apology. Start there." Crowley hesitated, then tried again. "There's been a grave misunderstanding. We'd like to make it right. Privately, of course. Perhaps a sit-down, a statement, together. It could." Darius cut in. "You dragged me off a plane, Damian." "No, our staff acted independently, not under corporate directive. The flight attendant has been suspended." Darius's voice didn't rise, it dropped. "She was emboldened by your culture, not rogue behavior." Silence. Darius continued. "I don't need a PR-crafted apology over Chardonnay and camera flashes. What I want is policy reform, mandatory anti-bias training, demographic hiring reports released to the public, and I want it before your next board meeting." Crowley tried again, now visibly sweating through the phone. "Darius, listen. This situation, if we don't control the narrative..." "You don't get to control the narrative anymore," Darius replied. "You lost that when your crew assumed the only black man in a suit up front had snuck in." Click. The call ended. The next day, North Air's stock dipped 12%. By the following week, it was down 27%. And Darius, he wasn't done. He met with civil rights leaders. He arranged a televised town hall. He funded a scholarship for minority aviation students. He didn't just walk away from the deal. He walked into history, using the humiliation meant to break him as the spark that ignited a systemic reckoning. Because sometimes racism doesn't wear a hood. Sometimes it wears a uniform and says, "Sir, you have to move." And when it does, men like Darius Benton don't just stand up. They shut it down. The press called it unprecedented. North Air executives called it a publicity nightmare. Darius called it the bare minimum. It was held in an open-air hangar on the outskirts of Atlanta, neutral ground, but charged with meaning. Not far from where black soldiers once returned from World War II, only to be denied service at the same airport terminals they'd helped protect. Rows of chairs were filled with people who had stories like Darius's. Worse, even. A black pilot denied promotion for years. A mother removed from a flight with her son because a white passenger felt uncomfortable. A teenager made to show 3 forms of ID for a standby seat he'd paid for. Darius stood at the center. No suit today, just a navy sweater, black jeans, the sleeves pushed up, his voice steady. "They say it was a mistake," he said, glancing at the North Air spokesperson sitting stiffly beside him. But I've lived long enough to know what mistakes look like and what patterns look like. This was not a glitch, it was a default setting. The crowd murmured in agreement. Cameras flashed. A journalist called out, "Mr. Benton, do you want an apology or revenge?" Darius looked directly into the camera. "I want neither. I want change." He pulled out a folder, copies of the Benton Racial Equity Aviation Plan. He had drawn it up in under 48 hours with a team of civil rights attorneys, former airline staffers, and DEI experts. Mandatory racial bias training for all staff. Anonymous passenger discrimination reporting app. Public release of all discrimination complaints quarterly. Diverse hiring pipelines from HBCUs and urban aviation academies. And a permanent seat on the North Air Ethics Board for a civil rights liaison. "If you're serious," he said, placing the folder on the podium, "sign this. If you're not, you'll watch the skies get very quiet." Crowley wasn't present, but his proxy was, and she was sweating. The world watched. The pen hovered. And then, she signed. A gasp rippled through the hangar. A standing ovation followed. Not because racism was defeated, but because for once, it hadn't won quietly. Darius walked off stage, greeted by a long line of young black boys and girls, some with model planes in hand, some with dreams in their eyes. He knelt to their level and smiled. "Next time they say you don't belong, just say, 'Darius Benton already cleared the runway.'" The backlash was immediate, and it was loud. Fox panels labeled him an agitator. Online trolls flooded his inbox with slurs. A viral hashtag, "Too Much Turbulence," mocked his overreaction. But Darius had faced worse. He'd grown up watching his mother wait tables at a downtown diner where the tips always got smaller when she wore her natural hair. He'd sat in economy while clients he brought to deals were upgraded to first. He had seen this movie before. This time he was rewriting the ending. Within a week of the town hall, 3 other major airlines quietly reached out. Not with PR fluff, with offers. "What would it take to bring your business to us? Can you help us overhaul our equity policies?" He didn't say yes. He said, "Show me something that isn't built to break people who look like me." Meanwhile, Crowley, the man who once barked, "You have to move, mister," was fighting to keep his seat. But it was too late. North Air shareholders were livid. One, a retired black woman named Darla Sinclair, stood at the emergency shareholder meeting and said, "I didn't invest in this airline so my grandsons could be treated like cargo. I invested because I believed in the future. Mr. Crowley, you clearly don't." The board vote was swift. Crowley was removed by a 7-2 vote. His severance? Frozen. His replacement? A Latina aviation executive from Los Angeles who had started her career as a baggage handler. Her first order of business? Calling Darius Benton. "Let's build something that flies higher, together." As for Darius, he didn't celebrate with champagne. He flew commercial, coach, next to a black teenager named Andre, who had recognized him at the gate, and whispered, "You really did that?" Darius had smiled. "No, we did. I just lit the match." That flight, Delta 4832 from Atlanta to Newark, was the quietest flight of his life. Not a single security agent glared at him. No one called him sir, with that rehearsed smile hiding suspicion. No one asked if he was really supposed to be in that seat. For once, he wasn't flying through judgment. He was flying through justice. 6 months passed. 6 months since Darius Benton, black CEO of Benton Tech, had been yanked from seat 3A like a threat instead of a guest. 6 months since North Air lost a $7 billion partnership in under 7 minutes of racial profiling. But he didn't fade into silence. Instead, he launched Project Flight. Future Leaders in Global Hospitality and Transportation, a nonprofit aimed at training young black and brown professionals in aviation, tech, and executive leadership. He didn't just cut checks, he mentored. He showed up. One night, while speaking at a university in D.C., a young woman raised her hand and asked, "Mr. Benton, if that incident never happened, if they never dragged you off that plane, would you have started this movement?" Darius paused. The room was still. "I would have made the deal, closed the contract, posted about it on LinkedIn. But I wouldn't have looked around at the flight crew, the boardroom, the gate agents, and realized how few of us there were." He leaned in. Sometimes racism doesn't come with a slur. Sometimes it's a polite tone telling you don't belong. But the truth is, we've always belonged. We just stopped asking for permission. The airline industry had changed. North Air was forced to implement mandatory anti-bias and accountability training, not the watered-down corporate kind, but sessions led by real people with real scars. Gate agents who once turned a blind eye were now empowered to call out bias loudly. Executives were required to shadow frontline workers for 2 weeks every quarter. No suits, no special treatment. Airports quietly updated policies. Security protocols had to pass independent racial equity audits. And somewhere in the fine print of a new FAA memo was a clause nicknamed the Benton Rule. Any passenger removed due to alleged safety concerns must have incident footage reviewed within 24 hours, with full transparency. It wasn't perfect, but it was pressure. And pressure, Darius knew, was how diamonds formed. So what about the man in seat 3A? He still flies, but now when he boards, eyes still follow him. Not with suspicion, but with recognition and respect. To you watching this, if you've ever been told to move, to calm down, to wait your turn, or maybe fly coach instead, remember, you are not the problem. The system that made them feel comfortable saying that is. And just like Darius, you don't need to scream, you don't need to beg, you just need to stand up, hold the line, and say you just lost $10 billion. Because silence protects systems, but your story can dismantle them. Speak up. Share this. The sky isn't the limit. Not anymore.